Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
My name is Govind Patel. I'm the Dean of the Patel College of Global Sustainability. I have the distinct honor to welcome our guests and our students to our Fall 2020 Patel College Sustainability Series, Speaker Series. This is unusual time for us. This is not the normal way we kick off our Fall Sustainability Speaker Series. We all gather in our building in Patel Center, and we see each other and interact with each other. But this pandemic has made it impossible for us to do that. Nevertheless, it is not going to stop us. We are Patel College, we are associated with Patel College. We are here to solve problems. So we think this virus is another layer added to the sustainability puzzle, so one that we are here to tackle. So I have the distinct pleasure to welcome our students and our guests. The speaker today is Mr. Spencer Jourdain, and his two colleagues will be speaking to us about educating for a sustainable future. First, let me spend some time to introduce Mr. Jourdain, and he will then introduce the other two speakers. Spencer Jourdain is an AB cum laude graduate of Harvard University with a concentration in history. After performing long-range business planning for an elite technology corporation, Mr. Jourdain launched his career, a long and distinguished career, as an economic development specialist and consultant, including developing during the late 1960s early interdisciplinary designs for both minority enterprises and social development, for which he received several awards. He also pioneered strategies for intensive capital development by major financial institutions as a primary requisite to fuel emerging businesses, communities, and societies in the US and globally. Mr. Jourdain co-organized the first global broadcast of the United Nations historic 1987 Brundtland Commission report that defined the concept of sustainable development. We all know that, right? He has since developed innovative sustainable development educational concepts and national and international learning for sustainable world initiatives. So we are delighted to have Mr. Jourdain kick off our sustainability speaker series. And I will now invite Mr. Jourdain to introduce his colleagues. And after that, for about 10 to 15 minutes of each, sometimes less, depending upon how they want to do the presentation. After that, we will have Q&A, and we will give you more instructions about how to ask questions. So, Mr. Jourdain, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Dean Patel, and the Patel College for Global Sustainability. In my presentation, I have two distinguished colleagues. Danielle Strasburger is the co-founder of Harvard Forward. Danielle, would you say a few words of greeting?
Hi, everyone. As Spencer said, my name is Danielle. I graduated from Harvard in 2018 and am one of the co-founders of Harvard Forward, which I'll be talking about later on today. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Danielle. And Richard Truby is co-founder of the Mesoamerican Development Institute. Richard? Richard, are you on?
Thank you, Spencer. I look forward to giving a brief overview of our projects and how we apply your sustainable education concepts in our work in Honduras.
Thank you. In 1987, the Brundtland Report issued what is the most world-shaking analysis and profound conclusion that the UN has ever produced. Humankind's economic and social practices have exceeded our planet's capacity to provide the necessary resources to continue our present way of living. We need to urgently develop a new sustainable future. The report defines sustainable development as development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. And young people today are taking note of that definition. As a result of that report, heads of state from over 100 nations met in Rio de Janeiro in 1992 and pledged to work together to create a new sustainable future. However, in 2020, we receive almost daily news that the generations since 1987 have not come close to meeting the timetables that have been set by the scientists to transition to a sustainable world. We're running out of time. This brief history illustrates that the work of our host, the Patel College for Global Sustainability, is today of ever more urgent importance. And the Brundtland Report powerfully changed the focus of my life from minority-inclusive economic development to integrating that development into the global goals of the Brundtland Report. By chance, I had the fortunate opportunity to co-organize the first global broadcast that included messages from 8 of the world's leading heads of state: George H.W. Bush, Mikhail Gorbachev, Reeve King of China, Reeve Gandhi of India, and 4 other heads of state, including, of course, Gro Brundtland of Norway. And they all confirmed sustainable development as the priority issue that will require world-changing solutions in the coming decades. When a senior UN official stated to me that education of then 6 billion people around the world would be crucial to achieving that successful transition, it became clear that education would, for me, be a natural and exciting choice as the focal point for my work from that day forward. So my new focus produced a Learning for Sustainable World Teaching and Learning framework, and it was composed with the assistance of 2 doctoral students at Harvard's Grad School of Education. And here are 4 quick examples of its teaching and learning elements. Project-based learning, toward academic knowledge to engaging that knowledge with real-life issues. The objective is to validate the real-world power and value of education today to achieve real-world sustainable results for students, for the teachers, and for society. And there soon came a corollary principle at a retreat in 2003 of 8 Learning for a Sustainable World teachers who asked Professor David Perkins if he would select one valuable takeaway teaching element that they could offer to their students. And after a short pause, he replied, "Teaching core academic knowledge in the context of real-life issues that students care about." A second example is critical thinking and reflection, and there the objective is to enhance the depth of information acquisition and retention and its real-life associations. And quickly, the last 2 elements are interdisciplinary and multicultural learning that blend core STEM science knowledge with clearly vital social science learning. The objective is to enable students to work in diverse multicultural projects, which through their diversity and perspectives can often achieve the best sustainable solutions. After all, We're in an ever more diverse, engaged, and humanly interdependent planet. Okay, so a few examples of the projects very quickly are, one of our earliest ones was supported in innovative teachers introducing concepts of sustainable solar energy to high school students in a racially transitioning school. And the object was to engage the students in learning basic science. How? By building and racing a solar-powered car. They won a U.S. high school racing car competition and went on to place 6th in an international competition held in the Australian outback. For sure, a broadly educating interdisciplinary project. On the west coast, of students off the islands of Seattle's Puget Sound, led by a revered teacher and local environmentalist, Shan Weston, explored their fragile land and marine environment. The result? They successfully convinced their adult community to create initiatives to monitor and to try to more sustainably manage their local environment. And then in another project, the junior high school projects in students in Brazil were also led by innovative Brazilian project-based learning teachers. And they explored the poverty and the economic inequality and the environmental issues of a tiny Atlantic seacoast and rainforest community. It was only a few hours away from Sao Paulo. And again, the result was that the young students brought adult, public, and private leaders to their school and urged them to become concerned advocates for the sustainable development of that impoverished community and its ever more endangered forest and seacoast environment. So it's through such projects, it was becoming clear to students that humankind is indeed facing a monumental crisis regarding its ability to achieve an attractive, sustainable future. I was among the hundreds of educators from over 70 countries at the launch of the United Nations Decade of Education for Sustainable Development in 2004. That's an august goal. And at the podium was Sweden's Minister of Education, Thomas Östros, he rang out a prophetic statement. Education that does not place at its center the achieving of a sustainable world is today hardly worthy of being called education. Our Learning for a Sustainable World framework was selected from over 70 to one of 18 to present at that conference Outbreak. And from that gathering, a new project and university collaboration would emerge, which you'll hear out from Richard. In 2016, the UN established new sustainable goals. And these goals can form vital issues around which educators can create exciting interdisciplinary learning, gender equality, clean water, clean energy, reducing human inequalities, industry and civic innovation, and climate action, and finally, partnerships to achieve these goals. Now, I think we can all see that virtually all of these issues are man-made. They're cultural issues. They require cultural as well as technological solutions. So I think that the recent focus on STEM education should probably add 2 capital S's for deeper involvement of the social sciences. We need interdisciplinary learning that reflects the importance of the social sciences, and I include in there economics, if we're going to create successful solutions to all of the UN goals. We already have most of the technological and economic resources that we would need to achieve the UN goals, but we're woefully short of developing adequate cultural tools to reach those goals. More simply put, I think it's the cultural values, norms, and the goals that are most crucially hindering our chances of successfully achieving a sustainable future. Because it's what people want to do and how they want to live and what people want to have that determines most of the actual daily human activities that now urgently need transition to sustainable formats. Unfortunately, that's exactly what young people today are demanding. In many of the UN sustainable goals, as our final featured speaker, Danielle Strasburger, will powerfully illustrate, young people are leading the way. They realize that a sustainable future These changes can only succeed with transformative educational innovation and educational leadership, and that changes social and institutional practices to achieve a sustainable future require new education. As Martin Luther King exhorted us, and now more than ever, we indeed face the fierce urgency of now. But si se puede, I believe we can. I'd like to tell you about two current sustainable education-based initiatives which I'm engaged that effectively illustrate the UN goals. I first learned about the Mesoamerican Development Institute and its transformative innovations at a 2004 conference of International Solutions to World Poverty conference. It was in Boulder, Colorado, and I was co-organizing the educational track. And there I met the very revered University Professor Engineering William Moeller. And Bill Moeller introduced its clean solar energy, MDI's clean solar energy technology to power coffee drying in the coffee developing world, and also to transform agricultural production. And that industry is now the $1 billion, is in the $100 billion coffee industry. Now, Bill would soon introduce me to MDI co-founders, Raul Raudales and Richard Truby. We would soon organize a joint educational project engaging several students from an EU educational program that I'd countered at the UN Decade of Education Conference. And these students would work with coffee farmers in an MDI solar drying coffee project in Costa Rica. They studied the beneficial effects of MDI solar and biofuels drying process, as well as its innovative concepts for more sustainable coffee farming. And their studies became a part of their final exam. So as a result of their studies, one of EU students would several years later resign from a cushy corporate position to start a sustainably produced coffee and roasting and distribution company in the EU. And it began with MDI solar dried coffee. So for me, this constituted a complete soup to nuts proof of concept of the efficacy of pedagogical frameworks of learning for a sustainable world. Now, Rich, can you tell us more about MDI?
Thanks, Spencer. Our organization is applying Spencer's educational principles with our field teams implementing a new model of sustainable coffee production and processing in Honduras. I first got engaged in this project as a student at UMass Lowell studying environmental science. I was also a co-director of a human rights group focusing on Central America and trying to influence US policy there. Through that, I met my business partner from Honduras. He was studying energy engineering, and we strive to come up with a program that would support positive social development, renewable energy technology, and environmental protection in one single program. With our approach, collaborative research and experiential learning are applied to address key real-life problems, including deforestation, protection of watersheds, poverty, lack of employment, and widespread immigration. And we're sensing right now with the pandemic and the international process for equality, it's changing perceptions and business as usual, providing an opening for alternative development models like ours. One other small, though a silver lining, is that with online meeting tools, we've been able to broaden participation with our students in Honduras and in meeting with government ministries to advance our program, the Eurobiological Corridor. And finally, people are used to meeting with these tools, and we're actually having more meetings and more participation. The current model of coffee production, it replaces forests with coffee plantation, and tropical forest is cut to provide firewood to dry the annual harvest, and it results in loss of forest habitat, destruction of watersheds, and scarcity of drinking water for the municipalities. Also, it reduces water for the largest hydro utility, El Cajon, in providing 25% of Honduras's electrical power. You can see, if you look carefully, the water line where the tree line where the water once was. That's how much the water is diminishing. And in the coffee communities themselves, we were seeing for the first time dry riverbeds. These rivers are important to the life of these communities. With our new model, coffee is grown in a new way that conserves or restores forest habitat on private lands, on small farms. The coffee is processed using 100% renewable energy, and local youth are trained to run the operations and export the coffee, resulting in a coffee that's good for biodiversity, good for the environment, and also provides new revenues for coffee farmers through carbon offsets made possible by the sequestration of carbon on the forested area of their farms. The fierce urgency of now can be summarized by this industry forecast that in order to meet the growing coffee demand, coffee production will need to triple by 2050. That would require an area roughly 4 times the size of Costa Rica to be converted to coffee production. That would basically destroy the remaining forest in Central America. Our research and education program employs a network of universities linked with our local students in Honduras to create award-winning research collaborations in multiple disciplines. In our model, coffee comes from forest-friendly and forest-restoring farms and is processed by carbon-neutral factories, gets exported to our alliance partners, many of whom Spencer has helped us establish, including Bay Coffee and Tea Company, which provides Café Solar on the University of South Florida campus. Another product, again, is the offsets are traded on the global market. So Café Solar represents a complete cycle of trade and research. The technology is made in New England and in Florida and exported to Honduras. The coffee returns to the campuses. And all these young people you see here are coffee farmers themselves. Many of them are students at the National Autonomous University of Honduras. And many of them women are moving into positions of management positions, of quality control, operations, and head of exports. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Spencer to tell us a little more about Bay Coffee and Tea on campus.
Thanks, Richard. Now let's take a look at Bay Coffee and Tea Company right here on this campus. I've known Herb and Carol Colvin for years. As co-founders of the minority and female-owned Bay Coffee and Tea Company, Carol often discussed integrating learning for sustainable world ideas into their Bay Coffee marketing activities at local markets. When I described NBI's sustainably produced Café Solar coffee and its agricultural innovations, Carol and Herb quickly became interested in adding Café Solar as a featured coffee in Bay's product offerings. And in 2013, Bay Coffee came on board as an MDI Alliance marketing partner. In 2016, USF Aramark Dining Services established a state-of-the-art Bay Coffee and Tea Company shop, serving coffee and high-quality eats right here on the USF campus. And the Colvins and I immediately started developing innovative campus projects for students to become engaged in learning for a sustainable world. Equipped with state-of-the-art communications technology, the Bay Coffee Argos shop in the Argos Exchange Building provides the perfect center for which students can gather for exciting campus and online activities involving sustainable development programs. Bay today seeks to engage all elements of the campus in creating sustainable development initiatives. 3 years ago, Bay joined as partners with the Patel College's internship program. The college has proved to be fertile ground for new ideas from faculty and students for sustainable development projects. For example, Patel faculty member Dr. Joseph Dorsey has engaged with Bay his interest in elevating Earth Day on campus to a multi-day celebration. He has also shared with us his very innovative programs for recyclable clothing. Although projects are slowed due to the COVID crisis, Bay has, via online work sessions, continued its collaborative agricultural project exploring aquaponic production of tea at Michigan's Interlochen School of Fine Arts. Interlochen's sustainability director, Emily Umbarger, is nationally recognized for her work in sustainable and organic farming. And in June, she announced that her team, utilizing aquaponic technologies, has produced an appealing Camellia sinensis tea plant. And it's a plant, through the skillful use of aquaponics, makes it a premium tea potentially growable in our part of the world, US part of the world. Exploring commercial aspects will be the province of Bay, utilizing its access to Patel and USF students' faculty research capabilities. Thus, both MDI, already on a large scale, and Bay Coffee on a smaller scale, illustrate big ideas that have utilized highly interdisciplinary elements for learning for a sustainable world and to serve the achievement of multiple United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Nor should we forget that the innovative farming technologies were produced by a fine arts institution. Now that's interdisciplinary education. Speaking of mega potential for collaborations, I'd like to present the final big idea in this presentation. I would like to introduce our final presenter, Danielle Strasburger. Danielle is the co-founder, as she told you, of Harvard Forward, and I think it's an exciting new organization created by young Harvard alumni dedicated to maximizing the sustainable goals in all aspects of university education and governance. In just 1 year, Danielle's Harvard Forward has achieved some remarkable results, which she'll share with you now. Hi, Danielle.
Hi, thank you so much for the introduction, Spencer. And hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. And a big thank you to Spencer for putting together this fantastic presentation. As Spencer said, my name is Danielle Strasburger, and I graduated from Harvard College in 2018. As a student, I was really interested in campus culture and how it's created and ways in which it could be improved. This led me to get involved with campus groups that focused on residential community life and sexual violence prevention and response. However, I didn't get involved with university sustainability efforts until after I graduated. The youth climate strikes in 2019 inspired me to get involved with the climate movement, and I started thinking about the cultural shifts needed to make a sustainable society, including on university campuses. That's when I founded Harvard Forward, which is the alumni climate movement that Spencer was just talking about, and that's what I'm going to be talking about a bit today. So next slide, please. So what does it take to have universities fully embrace advancing sustainability? The focus of today's presentation is advancing university sustainability, and Spencer and Richard have both already talked about some great examples of tools and frameworks that universities can use to engage in sustainable education. But how do you get universities to adopt these tools? How do you get institutions to recognize the importance of advancing sustainability and make it a priority? What inspired me to start Harvard Forward was recognizing the power that institutions of higher education have. If they decide to treat climate change as a priority, they'll be instrumental in creating a sustainable society. Sustainability isn't just another interest area, it's necessary for survival and is needed in all aspects of society. This means that truly advancing university sustainability means integrating climate education, climate research, and sustainability initiatives across all elements of a university. However, making sustainability a part of the fabric of a university requires a cultural shift. This means not just seeing it as another academic field, but as a value and as a priority that underpins everything the university does. Next slide. So how do you create a cultural shift at a university? As I mentioned earlier, I've always been interested in this question of how do you create cultural shifts on campus. Occasionally, cultural shifts come from visionary leadership. Maybe a university president has the power to set priorities and institute structural changes that facilitate cultural shifts. However, universities are typically large bureaucratic institutions where it can be difficult to make big top-down shifts that are successful and stick. This means that often real lasting change happens bottom up. The push for change often starts bubbling up in pockets. You get groups of students, faculty, staff, alumni, and others start voicing concerns and wanting to see more action on climate issues. And this is what's been happening at Harvard for the last decade. Different members of the community have been pushing for more climate education, for more resources for climate research, and a big one for divesting Harvard's $40 billion endowment from the fossil fuel industry. I won't get into the divestment debate too much today, but I think many people really care about the issue because of the cultural significance of it. If a university continues to profit from the fossil fuel industry, any other actions feel like surface level commitments and not a full scale commitment to sustainability. However, despite all the grassroots pressure at Harvard over the years for change, Harvard still hasn't responded with the urgency needed, and that's why we created Harvard Forward. Next slide, please, Richard. Okay. So, when speaking to the Harvard class of 2019 at graduation, former Vice President Al Gore said, "In order to solve the climate crisis, we must solve the democracy crisis." When a group of classmates and I, who are all recent graduates, looked at Harvard's inaction on climate, it was clear that it wasn't because of a lack of demand. People have made their desire for greater climate leadership very clear. The university just hasn't been listening. However, what we discovered is that Harvard's second highest governing board is democratically elected by alumni. So we decided to run candidates for the board who would campaign explicitly on issues around climate leadership and inclusive governance. And that is what the Harvard Forward campaign was. So this was a very ambitious idea. It involved creating a movement that could collect enough signatures to get the candidates on the ballot via a very rigorous petition process, and then enough votes to actually win in the election. We faced many challenges and were dependent on a lot of help from volunteers, alumni who were excited about what we were doing. But at the end of the day, alumni made it clear that they wanted Harvard to have leaders who care about climate justice. And in a historic result, 3 of our candidates were elected just about 2 weeks ago. These 3 candidates who were elected, Margaret Peirce, Thea Sebastian, and Jason Toei, are the first petition candidates to be elected since Archbishop Desmond Tutu in 1989. And so we're very excited about the success and hopeful about what it will bring. And we are planning on building upon the success and running another slate of candidates for next year and continuing to keep the momentum and the pressure on the university and the administration to have leaders who are more sustainable thinking and who are thinking more about the future and more proactively listening and responding to the concerns of the community. But while we're really excited about what's happening at Harvard, we also wanted to take what we've learned from Harvard Forward and expand it beyond Harvard, which is why I'm excited to speak about Harvard Forward with you today about some lessons and some takeaways. So next slide, please, Richard. Okay. So Harvard Forward does not provide an exact blueprint for change. Every university is unique, and what we did at Harvard might not be what is needed or what works for other schools. However, Harvard Forward does provide some helpful lessons, and in the interest of time, I'm going to focus on just 2. The first lesson is about building people power to create cultural shifts. I mentioned earlier that bottom-up demand for change often starts bubbling up in pockets. And it's really hard to create a cultural shift when things are happening in isolated pockets because it's difficult to build enough momentum or leverage to make change. This means that a big part of the work of Harvard Forward was breaking down silos. This was out of necessity. We couldn't win the election without building a broad base of support. So in order to build a broad base of support, we had to do a lot of relationship building. This meant connecting with groups, learning about the issues they care about, and figuring how we could fit those into our platform development, and building trust that our candidates would advocate for them and their issues. Climate change is such a massive issue that it can be faced from very many different angles with different priorities and perspectives. This means it can sometimes be difficult to get everyone on the same page around a certain set of goals or tactics. For example, Harvard 4 needed the support of student activists as well as from alumni, two groups that might often have different approaches and perspectives. And we also had to be very intentional about recognizing intersectional issues and advocating for principles of environmental justice. This often involved a more educational element around making sure people understood how climate change intersects with racial justice and why it's important to recognize the disproportionate impacts of climate change and environmental degradation on marginalized communities. We need to make sure that alumni from all backgrounds and students from all backgrounds felt like their concerns and needs were being addressed and advocated for. And in building this broad base of support, we had to ask ourselves, how can we connect with students at the various schools? How do we connect with alumni? How do we connect with faculty? How can we connect people who are working on climate research with people focused on curriculum development, with people focused on on-campus sustainability, with people who care about alumni engagement and sustainable investing? There are so many people who are doing important work on their subject of interest, but to create a cultural shift across a whole university, there needs to be a broad effort. And I believe strongly that everyone's work can be informed and improved by this type of interdisciplinary collaboration. We need all types of people to build a sustainable society, but they need to work together. So Harvard Forward had to try to fill this collaboration gap out of necessity. However, we would love to see Harvard and other universities set up structures to facilitate this type of collaboration and cultural shift so that it doesn't have to be organized by groups of alumni or groups of students. This does require university leadership to proactively set up those kind of structures, which brings me to my second lesson. And next slide, please. So the second lesson is about the importance of inclusive governance. While Harvard Forward was really focused on climate leadership, the second half of our platform was about inclusive governance. For example, we proposed reserving seats on the board for recent alumni and creating town halls and meetings between trustees and students. This goes back to the climate crisis as a democracy crisis framework from earlier. Even if you have a really broad base of support, it's hard to affect change if the people in power won't listen. So the lesson here is to figure out what the power structures are, discover who the power players are, identify channels that exist for community members to have their voices heard. In our case, it was the alumni elected board, but other schools will have different channels. And if those channels don't exist, you can use the people power you create to try to push for change. We're a big fan of trying to make sure young people, like students and recent alumni, are included in decision-making processes. And this can be at any level of university. It can be in committees that have students sit on them, or in trying to create a more sustainable society at any level, and making sure that young people have their voices involved because their futures are at stake. And then just to wrap up, the last slide, please, Richard, is looking beyond Harvard Forward. So Harvard Forward was developed to specifically address the issues that the Harvard community was facing, and by utilizing a unique channel to push for change, the alumni elections. We're hoping that other schools with elected trustee positions might adopt our tactics. For example, we helped launch a sister campaign at Yale called Yale Forward, and they just got a petition candidate onto their ballot for next year just this week. Even schools that don't have elected trustee positions can still learn from our experience, though, about building people power and pushing for more inclusive governance in order to create a cultural shift towards sustainability. I hope that this brief introduction to Harvard Forward has been interesting. Happy to answer any questions during the Q&A section or later on. And lastly, thank you so much to Spencer for being an early supporter of Harvard Forward and sharing your immense expertise and wisdom on the subject of sustainable education with us. And I look forward to continuing to work with him as we figure out what comes next for Harvard Forward and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle, for your remarkable achievements. I hope this presentation has given you a glimpse of the kind of projects and people that are recognizing the fierce urgency of now and maximizing our possibility of achieving a sustainable future, where we're indeed running out of time. As early as 2003, University of Massachusetts Lowell Provost John Wooding commented on the crucial nature of educating for a sustainable future. What are we going to do about global environmental warming? What are we going to do about injustice and inequality in our society? What I like about the notion of sustainability as a teaching and pedagogical tool is that it is all-encompassing and integrative, and there is no greater challenge for future generations than sustainability. And at Harvard that same year, I was in a conversation with the president, assistant to the president, Jamie Hoyt. He predicted environmental justice brings issues of fairness, equity, and meaningful participation in decision-making. I think that collaboration is the wave of the future for educational purposes, but also to solve real-life problems on the ground, bringing to bear resources of universities, students, professors, and important institutions. Now those words of both of them were spoken a generation ago. We're running out of time. Educators are responding with exciting, innovative teaching and learning. Just a few weeks ago, an educational expert on NPR confirmed Professor Perkins' insight back in 2003. The report cited a recent study on effective online learning during the current school shutdowns. And this study found that delivering curriculum knowledge that connects to issues of strong relevance to students' concerns achieved notably higher retained learning results. At the university level, fortunately, here at Patel College, education and sustainability presents us with exactly such great opportunity for students to learn to engage in this exciting journey. Just last week, Patel College announced in its Economics and Finance for Sustainability course, students will be led through a real-world application project, which will allow them to implement their new knowledge gained at Patel. I hope this has also shown how exciting the collaborations with programs and institutions such as Bay Coffee and Tea on this campus, with MDI and at University of Massachusetts Amherst, and its corollary organization, university in Honduras, UNA, and with strategic university-based initiatives, Harvard Forward, a generation of youth are waiting and ready to create a sustainable future. On my side, my final slide, you can read the quote that I had made in setting up the first Learning for a Sustainable World project, that we do stand on a threshold, and the future will be determined by what we do now. So I thank you for the opportunity to present these highly diverse approaches to sustainable development. And I thank you and hope that you enjoyed this presentation. We presenters would like to invite student, faculty, and administrative attendees across the USF campus to consider what sustainability issues your course curriculum or student projects or campus activities might engage with our Education for a Sustainable Future project, based here right on the USL Patel campus. You can contact us at the address on the slide. And of course, please visit the Argos coffee shop in the Argos building, where you will find sustainable development programs going on. Thank you, and we hope you enjoyed this presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Spencer, Danielle, and Richard for that very interesting presentation. You have covered a large swathe of topics to focusing on sustainability education, and also the action-oriented approach that you took in terms of your project in Honduras on growing coffee and also making coffee in a sustainable manner with the participation of the local people, which is very important. And also the action at Harvard in terms of making the university to change its investment policies, for example, by using their a huge endowment. So it's very interesting presentation, but I would like to bring our students to ask questions. So please stay, and I'll ask Kelly to take the next steps in terms of how the students can ask questions. You have to raise your hand. That you can see that icon, your hand icon, and press that, and then we will ask who that person is, identify that person, and you can ask that question, and then we'll have an answer for you. Kelly?
Yes, Dean, thank you. So for all our participants, as the Dean mentioned, everyone will be on mute, but when you raise your hand, you can unmute yourself to ask the question and then remute yourself, please. And we'll just read the questions from the queue. Thank you.
Don't be shy. It's the opportunity to break the silence, break the ice. We have, we give them maybe 30 seconds. Hello, Eddie? Now, if nobody's asking question, let me ask all three of you. In terms of, we are now in the 5th year of the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, and we have 10 more years to go in terms of the goals to be achieved by 2030. And I want to take up this particularly important element of education. And Spencer touched on that topic early on. And education is part of all the indicators and the sub indicators, or whatever we want to call it. So can you tell us exactly how education from K to university can be part of that movement, whether you take, for example, climate justice or food security, or in terms of any other action that we can take, a specific goal. So any one of you want to engage that?
Well, one thing at Harvard, there are students who are engaging projects to provide food services to local communities, and there's an extensive program for students doing intern type providing educational guidance to students seeking to prepare for higher education. So those are a couple of examples. I'm sure my colleagues also have examples.
I have an example in Honduras. This alternative model that we've created has all been put forward by local graduates in Honduras, but some are not even graduates. Some have only attended to less than the high school level. Yet with our mentorship program, they've been able to publish several scientific peer-reviewed documents now with their research. And we mentor them with universities and the U.S. Forest Service, and some of the mentors will actually stay, for several weeks working with them, and then some of the students will come as scholars, visiting scholars, and explain their research. So it's been very, very positive for us to see how much we've created this new model that didn't exist, and the protocols and the methods we've been doing are now being adopted all over Latin America through these young students who are really validating and documenting this new model. And the government last year in Honduras agreed to scale up this model by creating the Eurobiological Corridor. So I think that with students, a lot can be done. And this sustainable education. And one other point is these students are so have such a hunger for this and passion for this work. One of our pilot courses on energy and climate change, there are 300 students apply for that at UNA every year. So the most students they've ever had in a single class. So young people are just thirsting for this opportunity, and they can really get results with the right mentorship.
Yeah, and I'll just add on to that, that I think when I think about sustainable education and what universities can be doing, or even younger grades students, is just trying to make sure that every student who goes through our education system is exposed and is encouraged to interact. Because like I said, climate change is obviously, and sustainability is such a big topic, it can be worked into curriculum of other things that don't necessarily explicitly solely focus only on that one topic. And it should be brought into, if you look at a school that has, architecture degrees, think about sustainable design. If you're looking at law, you're looking at, what are the regulations around environmentalism protections. And I think a lot of students can go through K through 12 plus an undergraduate degree and never necessarily substantially interact with sustainability in education, and unless they've already been exposed and then seek it out. Like I know at Harvard, there are lots of opportunities to get involved if you seek it out, if you find those classes, if you find those research positions, if you find those clubs. But there have been students at the school who are already asking and saying, we have a core requirements. And we say, oh, every student should graduate having taken something in ethics, and we have these other core requirements, and that sustainability and that way of the framework of thinking about our environment and our world and our resources should be part of that type of required education that every citizen needs in order to be helping the world become a sustainable place.
Okay. All right. Now, one of the important aspects of sustainable development is how it is both local as well as global, that you need to have collaboration across localities to the state and the nation, and also globally. Now this pandemic has thrown a wrench in that arrangement, where we cannot travel, and also all kinds of restrictions now. Do you think that the technology that we have, like internet, for example, that helps us to communicate, but also how, what I'm saying is that how is this adding to the complexity of sustainability? Have you thought about this in terms of finding solutions, or is it making it even more complex or unsolvable, or is there some kind of silver lining out there?
I'd like
to teach us something.
I could share one, because in Honduras, the shutdown is very, very severe. You can't even, if you're driving, they'll impound your car. You'll be put in a holding area if you violate the shutdown. But what we've done is we were able to raise some funds so that students could work from their home on their manuscripts. They've collected a lot of data, and we're trying to synthesize that data. And but then, to our surprise, the government ministries, who almost never like meeting online, they've had to switch. And so we're actually having more meetings. And in the past, we would have to travel. And if we wanted to bring students, sometimes they'd have to come from remote study areas where we're co-managers of a national park. They would have to come and travel, a whole day. It's expensive. But now they're participating through the online meetings. And all these bureaucrats are becoming quite comfortable with the tools. And we've actually had more meetings, had more and more participation than ever before. So that is a silver lining there. And that the pace of actually creating the corridor has really picked up because of the pandemic, surprisingly enough.
And also it forces people to be more self-reliant. Or how to manage with the resources they have. I mean, and also the importance of actions by the government and local communities to help those communities or people who are affected the most. So
Yes.
governmental action is needed for people to find their food, energy, or health, access to health, and things like that. I mean, in advanced countries, when we have seen problems here in the United States, which is the richest country in the world, but still we have the largest number of people dying of COVID. And so, so it's not just being rich itself is not going to help you. So my question is that more in terms of self-reliance solutions rather than looking for outside help for your problems. So it might be a motivation for many to think that way, develop sustainability, because sustainability is all about finding local solutions. So the United Nations, they have to think creatively now, international organizations, how to work on these issues. I mean, I've been with the international development field for such a long time. We even worked for the United Nations as the vice rector of the UN University in Tokyo for 6 years. And everywhere we travel almost 2-3 times a month to different parts of the world. And most of the times, those meetings might be just with a minister or somebody, or some local industry, and it's a waste of time, maybe most of the cases. So so there are both issues out there. There's a lot of waste involved in travel, and of course, the emissions, for example, from airplanes and things like that. But on the other hand, when these industries are shut down, those people who are dependent on that also are in dire straits. So it's the whole world is in the churn, in a way. So we will come out of this with some hopeful solutions, even though millions of people are suffering at the moment because of this pandemic. So I just wanted to add some element to our discussion.
And I would love to add in something about the pandemic and the impact on climate organizing and the climate movement, is that I think for people who aren't on the front lines of climate change, who aren't directly threatened by rising sea levels already or this environmental pollution, it can sometimes be hard to take such a big problem and distill into a way that motivates people to act locally or motivates people to get involved and push for change. And we've seen so many great conversations come out of the pandemic about how climate change is a global public health disaster and that we're going to see more pandemics and we're going to see more infectious disease as the environments continue to be destroyed of these vectors of illness and as climate changes and things spread more. And then you're looking at how that is compounded by these extreme weather events that we're having and the need, I'm in Texas, and the need to evacuate parts of the coast because of a hurricane, of a crazy busy hurricane season when there's a pandemic going on, and how absolutely destructive that is. And these fires that we're seeing happening in California and Oregon and Colorado, and that people are, having to worry about smoke while we're also going under a pandemic that targets the respiratory system, that these things all, it's a cycle that is just negatively impacting and making everything worse and compounding these issues. And so I'm hoping that brings that urgency in the sense that we can connect those dots and be like, these are all part of the same issues, that will inspire people to react with the same type of urgency needed to face down a natural disaster or face an epidemic, to as well facing issues of climate change and sustainability.
Okay. Richard, with your long experience in the development field, you have seen several really serious crises. And how do you look at this crisis now that is gripping the world? And what do you think might come out of this pandemic in terms of sustainable development? How we can address this?
I think
Yeah.
with what Danielle was saying, that there are all these symptoms of climate change that we're seeing now, and these pandemics very likely are another, where forest habitat is destroyed. Yeah, the predictions are there'll be more of these. So I think it is that kind of wake up call that you can't really play with Mother Nature, that this is serious and we have to take actions, because you see if we don't take actions, these economies will be destroyed, human lives, and we do a lot of meetings with development banks, and I've seen a sensing a shift in attitude where they're saying we have to do something differently, and during this period we've been going through getting financing for a new carbon neutral factory, and it seems like this attitude has helped because we got approval to go forward with the project, even though the pandemic was happening. I think they see the devastation through deforestation, and it's just making the subject matter more more real, more concrete.
Yeah, and also there's the ability of the new technology, especially the new communications technology, and the exemplified by the internet for universities and as departments and as student courses to organize specific local responses to the emergencies that exist, in communities around the world. So I am having a very positive view about our future ability. This situation was the wake-up call to make us see, number one, that we have to blend the technological knowledge with the cultural knowledge in order to create these, solutions to the problems that are man-made that we've created. And I think that the best example was the one that Dean Patel brought up about the new communications technologies. And back in 2003, even before there was internet usable in the ways that we're talking about, I had the Verizon organized. They said, we can't do it with our plain telephone service. I said, yes, you can do that, because once you get involved and interested, you will. We created a student forum from Brazil, involving Brazil and 4 different locations: Appalachia, the Puget Sound Islands, upstate New York, and California. And the students were able to work and discuss common problems and solutions. And they really they thought that was a major part of their education. Now, 25 years later, they can effectively use those tools to solve specific problems. And so I'm very optimistic that the blend that you mentioned, also it's going back, one of our principles of education, it was the use of Forstein's self-directed knowledge, which is now vastly superior, by which students go out of their classroom and search for tools, which in the old days were libraries, but now there's the whole world library online. And now they can use it not only to learn, to get knowledge that they're interested in this particular aspect of the problem or that particular, but they're able to transmit that knowledge and translate it into coordinated action with other students and other courses and professors doing the same thing, and university institutions doing the same thing from the institutional standpoint. So from the early stage, I've always believed that the power that was coming from the development of the new electronic media technologies would be a whole revolution of human possibility in itself.
Well, that's on that positive note, we have our event today. Kelly, do you have anything to add before we wrap it up?
Thank you, Dean. I wanted to thank all our participants that joined us today, and also announce that next week we will have another presentation by our college alum, Maria Watson. So I hope that everyone will join us next week as well. but especially I wanted to thank our distinguished panel today. We really enjoyed each of your unique perspectives about sustainability. It was a real treat to listen to all the many initiatives that you have going on. And I hope that our students will continue to stay engaged with your organizations. And thank you, Dean, for hosting today's meeting.
Sure, not at all. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful evening.
Yes, you too.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.